Hello everybody, this is just going to be a quick tutorial about how to make a quick and cheap LARP sword. All the materials in this LARP sword you can buy at Home Depot and Walmart, so no matter where you are around the country, you're probably going to have access to what you need to build this. Other pro, it's very cheap. You're going to be able to crank out 4 of these for like $15 to $20. You're going to be able to do it relatively fast as well. There's no glue involved in this build, just tape. So you won't even need to wait for them to dry. And the only part that I'm not going to teach you how to make is the cloth cover to finish it. You've got a bunch of options for that, but mostly you can still use them without the cloth cover. You'll just need it if you're going to take it on like a national field, and it will improve their durability. It'll keep the foam from getting gouged or damaged while in use. So yeah. So this is all you're going to need in order to make this. This was a 10-foot stick of white PVC that I got at Home Depot. You're going to want to get it in the 1/2-inch variety. Don't go up the next size. It's too thick, too heavy. Now, if you have access to graphite golf club cores from Goodwill, those are a superior core. That's what I build my sword on. Generally speaking, with cores, the lighter the better, as long as it doesn't flex too much and isn't going to snap on you. It'll make a good core. Obviously, it can't be made of metal either. But yeah, this sword I built on a graphite golf tube, and it's lasted me a long time. The sword hasn't broken. I've replaced the foam multiple times on it. But if you can't find that, 1/2-inch PVC will do. You do not want to go with the gray stuff necessarily. It's a little bit too heavy and dense. It's more durable, but frankly, the odds that this PVC is going to break on you during normal use is super low, especially if you're making swords that are kind of in the 31 to 32 inch range. Since you're going to be buying a 10-foot stick of PVC, if you cut that into fourths, that's going to give you 2.5 feet each. So that allows you to make 4 equal-sized swords. You could go longer with it. Just the longer you go, the sooner it'll break. PVC does flex a little bit and bend, and eventually does wear out and snap. It takes quite a while, though, and quite a bit of force to make that happen. Right, it's summertime, so these foam noodles are now in stock at most Walmarts. This is the 3-inch diameter one. You do not want to go larger than that, to the 4-inch, unless you have a specific purpose in mind for that. You don't want to go smaller than that, to the 2 and something inch, because it's below template standards. So not only will it not pass on the field, but it's not quite safe enough for use. And also, you just need, for a thick core like PVC, you need to have about 3 inches of foam, or a 3-inch diameter foam around it. That's about the sweet spot. If you go any thinner, you're going to start feeling the core on heavy hits. So yeah, Walmart, Home Depot. The only tool you'll really need for this is a steak knife. Make sure you get one that has nice big serrations on it, like a saw. You can use a saw to cut the PVC. You can also get through it with this, and you can also use this to trim graphite. Just don't breathe in the carbon fiber, or don't do that. Packing tape. This is athletic cloth tape. You can buy it at Walmart. Make sure you don't get the wrap. Get the tape. There's 2 products that look very similar, and you want to get the stuff that's actually adhesive. And this does come in packs of 4 if you want a lot of it. That's how I buy it, because it is a bit cheaper that way. But you won't need that much to make 4 swords. 1 roll will probably do you. This is a blue camp mat. They don't always have these in stock where I live, but you'll only need 1, and then you'll have a ton of leftover. As you can see, I've been using this one for a while. You don't need a ton of this one for this particular build. It does make decent shield material though if you layer it and cut it to shape. It's a little bit narrow though. A lot of people like their shields a little bit wider than this, so yeah, lots of tangents. Let's get building. Okay, so first I'm going to cut a 2.5 foot length off the end of this pipe. All right, so be careful while you're doing this. Obviously, don't slice open your hand while you're applying pressure. PVC is hollow, so you don't actually need to cut clean through it. You can just kind of score all the way around it and then just snap it off like a Slim Jim. All right, next up we're going to cut some blue foam for the underlying structure of the bat. What you're going to want to do is cut 1/2 inch to 3/4 thick strips of foam. They don't need to be a particular length. They do not need to, make them longer than 6 inches or you're going to hate yourself later. But they can be longer than that. I'd cut 2 to 3. The idea of what we're going to do with these is spiral tape them along the core on the interior. And that'll allow us to create a friction fit with the pool noodle. Because as you can see, if we were to try to insert this in right now, it's not secured at all. There's still space in there. But if we tape some of this blue foam on, that will allow us to increase the diameter to the point that we're only going to be able to fit the pool noodle over it with great force. That'll create a really tight, solid friction fit. It'll keep the foam from rotating and it'll hold up during use. So I've cut off these 3 strips and now I'm going to teach you how to torque wrap. Before we get to that, these pool noodles are about 4 feet long. I think they might be just a little longer than that. Let's check. Yeah, just a titch longer than 4 feet, which is perfect because we're going to want 2 2-foot segments. So I'm going to cut this to 24 inches. Goes right through. And here's my sword foam. So this is going to comprise the blade of the weapon. Alright, so I cut the blade so that I could get a visual concept for how much of this weapon is going to be covered by it. I'm going to leave a minimal handle on this one. It's obviously pretty short. It's going to be a one-handed sword exclusively. You have to pad 2/3 of it or more, so make sure you don't do a half and half bat. It doesn't pass template, and it's not the safest. You want to pad at least 2/3 of the weapon, just with incidental at least. Okay, so we're going to start right about here. All right, so I'm going to take a strip here and put it, 4 inches up from where the handle is. Give it a decent margin. The handle will be fine. We're going to do something else to secure the foam down at that end, which we'll see later. But what I want to do is take my packing tape, and with the foam placed kind of in a diagonal manner, like so, I'm going to tape it down to the core. Now when I tape it down, I'm not going to worry about squishing it. I'm going to let it be super squished if possible. Right? So there we go. You can see just how much I squished that down. So this is a technique called torque wrapping. As you wrap the tape, you are torquing it down. Torquing down the foam and making it tighter and tighter with each pass. You probably need to only go over it like twice max. Alright, so then I'm just kind of pulling this into a nice tight spiral around the core. And I'm going to do it to the top end. Make sure it's real tight. So when I torque wrap, I like to give a lot of slack and then press it down as I apply the tape. There isn't a right or wrong way to do it as long as you get the right result. So there you go. So as you can see, that spiral's on there nice and tight. Now I'm going to go ahead and use these two strips and kind of space them evenly, making spirals here and here so that, you know, the entire core is more or less covered in these little blue foam spirals. All right, bam. As you can see, left plenty of room for the handle, plus a lot of margin, and I've taped it all the way up. You don't want to tape it all the way up to the end. You want to leave some room because of the next step. So I cut 2 more strips of blue foam. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it over the top like this, torque wrap that down. Then I'm going to take this one crossways like so and torque wrap it down. And I'm going to torque wrap it down intensely hard. The goal is going to be to pretty much flatten it, flatten it, flatten it, flatten it, so it's on there real good. All right, so we got that end foamed up. As you can see, I really torque wrapped it down here on the end. That is just to make sure it's nice and secure. So we're ready to apply the blade to this. And I'm gonna make you watch me shove it on in agonizing slow motion. Not gonna skip it, just because I think that'll be funny. All right, so what you this part is gonna be hard. So take your time with it, no rush. I'm gonna kind of squish the tip. Make sure, get it in the hole nice. Okay. Rotating and twisting it is okay to do here. This is why we wanted to torque wrap it so strong in the previous step, though, because we don't want it tearing off mid-process. Okay, so I've got that in. Next up, I am gonna grab it and just kind of twist as I go. The goal is to get the whole dang thing over the sword. There we go. Nice and slow, easy does it. If you get tired, take a break. Come back to it later. Or ask a friend to help. But I mean, the tighter this is, the more durable it's going to be. So, just trying to think about it that way, I guess. I don't know. Whatever helps. There it is. Okay, so I am real close. Just going to take the rest of the way. You want to stop when the edge is just about flush with the tip. Even it out, squish it, and bam, look at that. That's all the hard work done. Now I just got to do the finishing touches. Okay, so next step, gonna take your knife, you're gonna cut diagonally around the base of this foam tube, like so. You're essentially gonna make it from a cylinder end into a cone end. Cool. If you do it nice and clean in one cut, you should have this little bit of foam, which could come in handy later. So hold on to that. And yeah, I don't need to pause. Next step comes immediately afterwards. You're going to take your tape. You're going to place it right here at the edge of the cone. Get a good start. And then, so I'm starting right about here, and I'm going to torque wrap it all the way down to the core. Just tightening it, ratcheting up the tightness a little bit with each time around. So you don't need to start off too tight, just secure, firm. Okay, let's get a little tighter, a little tighter, a little tighter, a little tighter, a little tighter. All that tightness just adds up. So you've got a nice, smooth taper down to the core, like so. Bam. Okay, next up, you're going to want to see to the stabbing tip. This is another place you want to use your blue Kemp mat. You can trace it out if you want to do a really pretty job. It's not necessary. So what I'll usually do is just place the end on the Kemp mat, and I guess I am kind of tracing it out, but I'm tracing it out by making a bunch of light cutting score marks. Yeah, try not to stab your own pinky. If you cut yourself while you do this, not my fault. You picked up the knife and you made a choice when you decided to craft a sword. There we go. Okay, so I've more or less determined my shape here. So I'm just going to go over my own cutting marks. Great. I've got a 3-inch diameter circle. That's more or less going to perfectly align with this. Now, as you can see, it's not perfect. But I'll tell you what, fam, it doesn't need to be, because we're going to be taping it down later anyway. Don't just make one, make 2 of these. I'm going to skip this. All right, again, another roughly correct circle. Doesn't need to be perfect. Let's see. Perfection is for people who take pride in their work. Alright, I'm going to roll a little loop of packing tape here. The main purpose of this is just to hold the circle in place. Alright, cool. So that's more or less on. Do it again. Roughly center that. Squish it on. Okay, these are just holding it in place. Those loops are going to do nothing in actual combat. So we're going to pull out our cloth tape. You don't really want to use packing tape on this particular build on the exterior. I would add a small caveat and say that if you've got, if you've managed to get your hands on a graphite core, putting packing tape on the foam isn't a bad idea. It increases the hardness of the hit just a little bit. In my opinion, you put tape on one of these where the core is made of PVC and it's already kind of right on the line of being too hard, and you're going to push it over. So I would leave the foam bare of packing tape on this, but it does increase the longevity of the foam somewhat when you're making it on a graphite. Okay, so you can see what I did there. With 2 strips of cloth tape, I created an X. Make sure the X extends to like 2 inches over onto the pool noodle. And then starting at the bottom of those strips, I spiraled the cloth tape up to right here. This will make for a good, soft, relatively durable stabbing tip. But let me tell you what, no stabbing tip is immortal, and it's the first part that goes on every sword ever. So when it breaks, don't despair, just cut some more foam, tape it back up with more cloth tape, get the sword back in the fight. All right, next and final step is the pommel. So you can see what I've done on this one. I'll bet you've already guessed, but there's a ton of torque wrapping involved in this part. Good thing you're already an expert. We're going to use the scrap foam that we got off the taper, and I find it's handy to pick your favorite end of that taper scrap. Now this isn't going to fit on perfectly. Again, it doesn't need to. The most important part is that you just roughly get this edge flush with the end of your PVC. I would actually overhang it a little bit. You can always squish foam down if there's too much of it hanging over, but you can't really stretch it out to where it isn't. So overhanging a little bit, especially on the pommel, which it's not a hit testable portion of the weapon. This is more up to your own discretion. Basically, with the pommel, the only thing you need to worry about is getting it to the right dimension, which I believe is 2 inches. I'm using this scrap because reduce, reuse, recycle, and it's here. Plus, it's just that much less foam you need to actually cut. As you can see, what I'm doing here is I taped one end on. I've just kind of been wrapping it around like this to get a sense for how that looks. Pretty awful, right? But I can take my knife and just kind of trim it down piece by piece, rechecking the shape, trimming down another corner here, another corner there, more or less getting it to a halfway decent look. Right? That's halfway decent. All right. We're not going to go nuts with the torque wrapping just yet. But take the other end, wrap it around to the shape you want, and torque wrap it just a little bit. You don't want to torque wrap this end of it. Torque wrap this end of it. You want to leave this end with as large a diameter as possible at this stage, because we got to hit that magic number 2 in order to have it be a passing safe pommel. How close are we? All right, we're a little under, but I'm going to tell you a secret. It doesn't matter because of the next step. Okay, so this is where you're going to want to actually bust your ruler out for a little bit. You're going to want to make 2-inch squares. That's right, you heard me right, squares. I said 2-inch, but what I meant by that is like 2 1/4 to 2 1/2 inch squares. Pommels are best when they're kind of tight. They're most durable that way. The sword is most wieldable that way. You can kind of hold it even on the pommel without difficulty that way. Which means you're going to end up compressing this foam pretty aggressively as you build the pommel. All right, there we go. And then let's go 2 1/2 here. Okay. Why did I say squares? Because you saw the pommel. Obviously, it's a kind of circular shape. Well, the reason is it's hard and annoying to cut out a circle with the diameter, especially if you're trying to make it perfect. You're just going to be ripping your hair out, trimming corners, and maybe you'll trim too much and make it too small. Nobody needs that hassle in their lives. So my recommendation, start with a square. It's really easy to get a square that is roughly the dimensions you want. And I would cut out 2 of them. A little extra there. There, 2 squares. What we're going to do is we're going to, well, first I'm going to trim the corners to make these octagons. But then we're going to put them on smaller one first, then bigger one, if there's a difference. And we're going to torque wrap them down, obviously, once they're octagons. And tape over the bottoms a couple times to make sure they're secure. But 2 layers ought to do it on the pommel. Basically, the goal with the pommel, you want to be able to drop the sword onto concrete and not hear a click. It needs to bounce right off the foam on the bottom. If you can do that, it's probably a passing pommel. Okay, I took the liberty of cutting some octagons here. So we're going to put one on like that. Go ahead and rip strips for yourself. Don't worry about handling the whole roll these days. Again, it's just going to be more trouble than it's worth. Okay, so what I'm doing is I put the whole strip over the top of this, and I'm going to pull it down until it's on the core, like so, making it bow a little bit. That's okay. It's going to work. Get that tape down, pull another strip, and let's cross it the other way so that it's no longer a Pringle. It's more of a concave thing that is concave on both axes. 2 strips ought to do it. Let's put on the next octagon. If we want to be real fancy, we can rotate it 45 degrees from the way we did the first one. That'll kind of help to round out the whole finished product, make it look a little less square and a little more octagonal, or dare I say, even a little bit circular. Good news is, we're just compressing the heck out of it, so it shouldn't be too hard to achieve whatever shape you want, as long as you manhandle the foam into that shape. Whoop. Nice and tight pull over that. Great. That is looking not so bad, I think. And let's give it a handle test. Great. That is super tight. And now that we've got all these strips of foam or strips of tape ending here, we are going to want to wrap around that with one final torque wrap for old time's sake. Start here on the foam again and torque wrap it up onto the handle. And bam. This is a completed sword. It's somewhere in between short sword and, well, tiny sword and short sword length. I use a 36 incher. That's what I'd recommend. Probably the shortest your graphite one should be. Some people do 32, 33 or 34. I don't understand those people. You can make it longer too, of course, if you have graphite. But the nice thing about having a 2.5 foot core for these swords is you can make 4 identical swords this way. You don't have to steal from any one sword to make one longer. And they're hit safe. They're not going to injure someone. Even that crazy over-aggressive cousin of yours isn't going to injure someone too badly with this. They'll hurt them, but they won't injure them. As for finishing options, cloth tape is your friend. Let's just give a quick tutorial here. You can go over the pommel after you've taped it with the packing tape for its structure. Just go over it with 3 strips, right? 1, 2, let's go a little longer on that, 3. 3 ought to do it in most circumstances. Looks like it didn't quite reach on this one, but it's close enough. And then once you've done that, start at the top, around the edge of it. Remember, if you're going to take this onto a Belegarth field locally, you're going to need to put some green tape around this, because this is a stab legal weapon. And it needs to indicate that with the tape. There's a nice solid pommel. Looks pretty. Cloth tape has a nice satin finish. As for this, I have purchased at Smith's little pink boxes of like knee-high nylons. And they are thin, they are translucent, but if you layer them up, it doesn't look awful. And yeah, they'll tear, and you'll need to replace them eventually, but it's a decently cost-effective way. The shorter the blade, the fewer it takes to make it opaque. And if you don't have any markings on the blade, people can't usually tell it's translucent even after just like 2 or 3 coverings. You'll basically pull them over and use cloth tape or electrical tape to tape them down right around this tapered portion. And as for the grip, so on my personal sword, I have a baseball bat grip. It has a really nice grippy texture, and it's a tiny bit squishy and cushioned, which really helps. It improves the comfort of hitting people hard over and over again. It's a baseball bat grip, so not too surprising there. But yeah, that is how you make really cheap, mass-produced short swords to arm your family or friends with, or, I don't know, take to a ward activity. You could whip out, get some help from friends, you could whip out like 12 of these in an hour if you really production lined it and everyone handles a different portion of the process. But yeah, there you go. Enjoy.